I'm Gigi Mitchell. Today I'm going to show you how I upcycle yarn from thrifted garments to make other knitted pieces, like this hat, and 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 also this lace shawl. These hats and shawl are all available on Etsy at Gigi Mitchell Shop. On to the upcycling. I love to upcycle my yarn because it's an environmentally friendly way to source my materials. I get to create something new and beautiful and interesting from a piece that, for whatever reason, was given up by someone. I always hand-pick thrifted pieces that are made of exquisite material, such as cashmere or fine merino wool, silk, linen, or cotton. And my process is always zero waste. So let's start with a basic explanation of how industrial garments are typically knitted. Usually an industrial garment made out of a finer fiber such as cashmere, like this piece that I have here, is knitted to shape. So in this instance the armholes are not shaped, but if the armholes were shaped, they would be knitted into that shape instead of being cut out. Sometimes the industrial knitted garments will have shaped armholes, but the neckline will be cut out because shaping the neckline is a complicated process. It's easier to shape something that is on the edge of the garment versus in the middle, something that dips down. However, and I think this is a more recent method with which industrial garments are made, oftentimes when the neckline is shaped, it's knitted by two strands of yarn that go in opposite directions and knit one row at a time for this part here. And then when we get to the neckline and shoulder area, the two strands that were previously knitting one on top of the other basically separate and shape the neckline. So that can make it awkward to unwind the garment because you have these two strands that were knitted in opposite directions, and you can unknit them at the same time and kind of tug at the edge, or you can hook them up to two separate yarn ball winders and unwind one at a time. So I'll demonstrate shortly. Like I said, this is the piece that I'm using. It's beautiful cashmere, 100% cashmere, but I suspect that it was given up by its original owner because the shape is a little bit awkward. This bottom part, the bottom parts are supposed to drape, but they don't. They actually have a widening effect for this size, and I think that even though the piece is in great shape, that's why the person didn't wear it a ton and also gave it up. And the sleeves are not well shaped either, and also they're a bit narrow compared to the size of the piece. So if the piece is awkwardly constructed, or if it has moth holes, and these industrial garments are usually thin, very fine, because they're sort of scanty in material usually. If there are holes or any other small defect, at that point I unwind the yarn and upcycle it and get ready to create something new with it. So without further ado, here's how I upcycle. What I'm going to use to undo this piece is a seam ripper and two yarn ball winders. I also have this wonderful electric yarn cone winder. It's by Silver Needles, and the waiting list was super long and I love it. I use a yarn cone winder because I knit on a manually operated knitting machine, and with the knitting machine it's really ideal to have the yarn up on a cone because it flows most freely that way. So that's really it. I'm gonna get right to it. First I'm going to take off the labels. And by the way, another thing that is needed to do this is really good up-close vision because these threads are so fine. So after I've removed all the labels, I start at the end of the sleeve. There's a long seam here. Knitted garments are stitched up with a chain stitch. So with a chain stitch, it's just as if you made a chain stitch with a crochet needle. You just have to tug one end of it and it comes undone. I'll include an up-close image of the chain stitch here. So I found the edge of the chain stitch at the end of the sleeve, and you just have to pull that out. It's just tucked in here. So I've untucked it, and you can actually do this with your bare hands. You just have to find the end and tug. So now it's coming undone. And if it ever gets stuck in a place, I open it up a little bit. Sometimes the fuzzy fibers will stick together, and that'll prevent the chain stitch from coming undone. By the way, I still have something here at the edge to figure out. It's still held together. Sometimes the edge is held together differently. Oh, it looks like it has its own chain stitch here, just at the edge. There we go. So our sleeve is coming apart. Now we're at the armpit, and sometimes the armpit is reinforced with an extra stitch or two. And by the way, I always use these longer threads. I roll them up on a piece like this so I could use for stitching later. And the little pieces like this, I put aside in a bag for stuffing. The pieces that have come undone from a knit are curly and fluffy, so they make excellent stuffing for a little stuffed toy or a little pillow. So the armpit part is a little tricky. Sometimes the stitch can keep going, and sometimes I have to break the thread and find my place again. So I'm just going to cut into the side of the chain stitch and keep going at the side. Sometimes it might be tempting to just cut into a closed seam like this, but for undoing a knit, you never want to do that, because the threads that look like they might be holding the piece together are often the actual stitches of the knit itself. So once you rupture those stitches, that could be the whole row. So this is the whole side. I've opened the whole side, and these are the chain stitch edges that go around the sleeve. They were tucked into each other in the armpit area. By the way, I always wash these garments after I buy them, and then also once the piece is knitted. Okay, now I've opened up the whole side, so I'm looking for the chain stitch side of the armhole. It looks like it's on this side, and I have to find which direction it's going in. So it's going in this direction. This is it. This is the chain stitch, and again, I've undone it just by hand, and I'm undoing it all the way down. So here's the sleeve. The end of the knit is up here, so this is where I will start the unwinding. But first, I'm going to take apart the rest of the pieces. I'm going to do the other side and sleeve, and then I'll do the shoulder seams and the neck. Another reason why I love upcycling is because I end up with a very varied palette that I find. So it's an interesting way to acquire ideas about colors and color combinations. And I like finding colors and ideas rather than just sitting there and coming up with something and then going out and buying it. I like the way that the materials come to me and they inform my designs. Here's the second sleeve. Now I need to do the shoulder seams and the neck. I'm doing the neck first because it looks like the shoulder seams go under the neck. I'm not going to look for the edge, I'm just going to cut into the chain stitch at a place that I choose. And by the way, yes, the neck is also attached with a chain stitch. It's a rib knit, which is actually, on this side the stitch is open. So the end of the neck rib knit is directly attached to the garment with the chain stitch. Here's the neck ribbing, and now I'm undoing the shoulder seams. Just one more seam, guys. And here are the back and the front. Alright, let's start the actual unwinding now. There is a chain stitch up here, which works the same way. Once I undo it, it'll expose the live stitches. Here's the beginning of my thread. There's also usually a chain stitch down here, which I'll have to do before I start unwinding. Okay, so our piece is ready to unwind. I do unwind manually because the electric winder goes so fast and it can be too much for the fiber, especially a fiber like cashmere. So when the thread breaks or is discontinued due to a hole, let's say, I do make a little knot on the single layer of the fiber. And it's a very fine little knot, which is usually not noticeable, and if ever a knot is slightly noticeable, I always tuck it into the inside of the garment where it can't be seen. It looks as if this piece was knitted and shaped with a single thread rather than the two opposite knitted threads that I talked about in the beginning, so this will be easier. I could do this potentially on the yarn cone winder even. Well, this is unknitting so well that I think I'm just going to go directly to the cone winder. So now I've unwound the whole cashmere sweater and I got these cones of yarn from it. I forgot to weigh the sweater, but I would estimate that I got probably 400 grams of yarn or more. I've already used the yarn along with a beautiful merino wool that I unwound previously to make this hat. I really love this hat. I love the way that it came out, the color combination, and pattern, and both yarns are just so smooth. It's buttery, kind of silky smooth almost. This piece is also available on Etsy at Gigi Mitchell Shop. So unwinding the sweater that I used in this video was really so much easier than I expected it, and I feel really lucky about that. Because like I explained in the beginning, a lot of times industrial sweaters are knitted with two strands of yarn that go in opposite directions, and that makes the unwinding slower and more complicated and slightly awkward. This sweater was knitted with one strand like we saw, and that strand was also very nice and sturdy, even though it was cashmere. So I could just hook it up directly to my yarn cone winder and unwind it in one simple step. That cut the unwinding time probably in half, and I feel really lucky about that. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video and observe my yarn upcycling process. I hope that this video will help and inspire people with their own projects, and I hope that it'll encourage people to think about the ethical and eco-friendly sourcing of their materials. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in learning more about my hats and other wearable art, please visit Gigi Mitchell Shop on Etsy. And check out my Instagram at gigimitchell.us. And also my Facebook page, Gigi Mitchell Designs. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.